Hi everyone, welcome to Field Stories podcast. My name is Nick Smith. I'm joined with Chris today. Michaela unfortunately couldn't join, but we've obviously had a few issues there in the last few weeks, which we won't dwell on too much. We're just going to look to try and improve on from now on. But how are you doing, Chris? What's going on?
Yeah, no, I'm good. So last week was getting ready to go to the new field site, and now I am in the new field site. So I'm not in the. I'm in Peru. I'm in rainforest, but it's a bit different. I guess you can give the viewers this go. Since we're outside, we can give the mobile effect. You can see that the lowlands don't really have mountains like that, generally. So yeah, we're in the foothills of the Andes, and right now I'm at about 1,000 meters, and yeah, it's a definitely different environment. Lots of climbing, lots of hiking, um, cooler, which is really nice. But yeah, the hiking and then the moving around is a challenge. But the beautiful sort of cold, crystal clear water that you can jump into when you're hot is a nice little bonus. So yeah,
Sounds
super
wonderful.
busy, doing pretty well. I guess how are you, Nick? Because I mean, last week you weren't able to make it because
Yeah,
you were
to be honest,
on
the
France.
last month
So,
has been. Sorry,
yeah,
what was that?
you were
I
too
didn't
busy
hear.
gallivanting around France and drinking
Yeah,
wine and
that was.
cheese.
Oh, it was
Yeah,
glorious. Oh, that was
yeah,
glorious. I'll be honest, man. I've had a horrible month or two. It's just been terrible. I won't go. I'm not going to dwell on it because I've actually got some really exciting news. So instead of being normal pessimistic me, I'm going to be excited for once. And I'm really excited to announce that Dick Locke, who we had on the podcast, a very
hmm
fond guest of ours.
yeah.
I've been in contact with him, and I'm officially going out to Suriname with him for 6 weeks over summer.
Oh,
So
six
I've
weeks.
now booked it in. I'm in July 11th to August 26th. I'm joining him on 5 tours and helping him with some content creation. And yeah, it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to meet up with him. He seemed like a really, really cool guy on the podcast, and we've been in contact since. What a legend.
Yeah,
And Marcos, who you know as well, Chris, he's going to be
yeah,
there for
of
some
course.
of it too. So
Yep.
yeah, I'm
Wow, so
really, really pleased to say
crazy.
that.
Even I mean, we talk a lot obviously outside of the show, but even I didn't
Yeah,
know it was
yeah.
6 weeks. That's crazy.
Yeah, so
Wow.
that's going to be super fun, and then I'm hopping back to London for 2 days, and I'm going straight out to Uganda.
Wow.
So I'm there for 2 weeks, and I'm actually running a photography workshop with a local Ugandan guide. I think
That's
I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in detail in another podcast, maybe, or a separate thing. I will probably do some shameless plugging because why not?
all right.
But
Go
we are looking for people to join the tour at the moment. It's now on sale, if you like. I don't like to call it sale, but you know what I mean. We're advertising,
Yeah.
and it's in September. So from September 1st to 14th, we will be doing gorilla trekking, chimpanzee trekking, rhino tracking, and a myriad of other things. We're doing swamp tours, all sorts of. There's just like big five trails, like tree climbing lions. I'm sure you saw a bunch of
Yeah.
these when you were there,
Yeah.
Chris. So
Yeah.
yeah, for
Yeah.
me, it's time to be optimistic. I think, as opposed to the last month or two has been shit. I'll be honest, but time to look forward and be a bit optimistic about it. So
Wow, that's epic. That's great. That's fantastic, man. I mean, like I knew about Uganda, but yeah, I knew Suriname too, but I didn't know these 6 weeks. That's amazing. Well, you're gonna have an amazing time. So,
yeah, I
so I
mean, look
suspect there'll be
coming out
some.
of there.
Yeah, I suspect there'll be some episodes where you won't be able to make it as well. But yeah, it sounds
Yeah,
like you and Michaela with their new job as well. Both of you have some really exciting
oh,
announcements last week, and then you this week. So that's awesome. So
it's
I'm
good,
just
eh?
Amazon. No, actually, I mean
But that's
I'm
exciting
going
too.
to yeah. So I'm going to British Columbia for 3 weeks
Yeah,
to work with Wilderness International in June. So that's going to be cool. And then yeah, I mean my September might be interesting as well, and we'll be in new sites. And then I'll be back in Uganda probably in January. So there you go. I can't be
oh,
too
there you go.
jealous.
You
I
can't be
can't
too
be.
jealous, especially as you're living in one of the dream locations for
Well,
someone like
yeah,
myself.
but
Also.
we're still, the
I'm,
grass
I'm,
is always greener, right? So yeah,
yeah, it's
uh,
just not a surprise when you have something crazy going on.
I think that's what it is. You're right. That
With me, it's like, oh, I went to France gallivanting around. Sure, that was exciting. Okay.
yeah. No, that's awesome, man. I'm super happy for you. Well, anyways, you can give more details about Uganda and the other tours later. But yeah, we should
Yeah.
talk about this week's episode. So this week, really excited to have who's a guy who's become a really good friend of mine actually, Ettore. Met him actually 6 months ago or so when I was fortunate enough to be asked to help teach a course for some Peruvian students at a really famous research site called Cochicashu. And yeah, we kind of just hit it off right away. And yeah, I think he's gonna be a really, really good guest. I'm super excited. He's done a lot. He's worked in a lot of really cool places, including here in the Amazon. And yeah, I think he's gonna be awesome. I think we're gonna really enjoy the things he has to share. And yeah, I can't wait to get it started.
Yeah, it's an exciting guest lined up, I think, because obviously what you were telling me about the ecology behavior, or sorry, the not ecology behavior, the animal behavior.
Yeah.
I'm super excited to hear about that. I love learning about it, and I'm sure you'll have plenty of insight yourself. So I think between you two, we'll learn a lot as viewers for sure. Look forward to it immensely. I think we should just get into it.
Let's just go for it.
Yeah, nice one. So here's the interview.
All right, so our guest today is Ettore Camerlenghi. Hopefully, I didn't butcher that too much. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to meet Ettore, I guess about 6 months or so ago now, at a really cool research station here in Peru, Cochicashu. And yeah, I think I kind of felt like we were going to be friends when I overheard him behind me talking to his partner. I don't know what is it, like a macaw or something, and you said it's basura, and I was like, yes, finally I met someone who knows what a trash animal is. So I was like, I think I'm going to like this guy. And yeah, we've kind of been friends since, and it's been good to keep in touch with him. And I'm super excited to have him on as a guest. He's a behavioral ecologist who received his PhD at Monash University in 2023. And yeah, he works in Australia and the Amazon. He's actually Italian. So pretty global ornithologist, biologist, behavioral ecologist for sure. So lots of cool information to share with us and stories to share with us, I'm sure. So yeah, without further ado, Ettore, go ahead and give us some more background and tell us about yourself if you want, whatever you want to share with our listeners.
Yeah, so I'm a behavioral ecologist, as you said. That means that I'm interested in understanding the evolution of behavior, like why do animals behave the way they do, and especially in social behavior. Why do animals evolve like kind of interaction with each other, no? And with each other can be other individuals of the same species, but also can be individuals from other species, like when, for example, birds form flocks of very different species altogether, move together, and if drop on each other alarm calls, they communicate, they defend a territory together. So I remember, yeah, that was one of the first conversation we had when we met. It was about flocks,
Yeah.
and yeah, like I studied flocks in the Amazon for my master thesis, and then I went back during my PhD. And in the meantime, I was working in Australia on society of birds, like how complex societies emerge in little birds, no? And I found out there is a lot of complexity, um, even in little birds that are quite common, not necessarily in the Amazon, but even in like parks in Australia. Like you find extreme complexity in terms of association between individuals from kind of semi-urban areas up to the outback or to the rainforest. So yeah, that's what I'm studying.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think for our viewers and listeners, I mean, obviously people who know birds probably know exactly what you mean. And even when we talk about the Amazon and the neotropics, you know, mixed species flocks are such a big thing here. And I mean, most of the world, as you said. But you know, maybe you could explain a little bit more in detail. Maybe if you want, use the Amazon here in the region I work in as an example of sort of how that works and the different, I guess, structure and different placements within a flock that species have, just so our listeners have a better idea of how amazing and how complex it is.
Yeah, like actually for me, flocks, what was really struck me the first time in the Amazon, I was at TRC as a volunteer. That was exactly 10 years ago. It was 2014, and I saw flocks for the first time, and yeah, I got really into like when you walk in the Amazonian rainforest, you might come across these flocks. That they can be in the understory or they can be in the canopy. Usually are different types of flocks, and each flock has a leader or few leader species, and are leader in the sense that they probably lead the movement, but they also give alarm calls. So they are like the sentinel of the flock itself. So, for example, in the understory flocks in southern Peru, you usually have two sentinel species that are Tamnomanes ardesiacus and Tamnomanes schistogenus, and these two species are very vocal. When you walk in the forest, you when there is a flock, you hear like Tamnomanes, you hear them like
Yeah.
keep vocalizing, and I think that this kind of call they keep giving is a watchman call. It's called like that. It's kind of allowing all the other individuals to relax and to know that the sentinel is there and is they're all together, and the sentinel is looking for predator, is looking, um, is scanning all around. But then sometimes it's giving these alarm calls, and you see all the other birds in the flock that can be from 3 to 15, sometimes even more. And with bird, I mean different species, and
Yeah.
usually it's like a couple of individual, like a proper pair, sometimes three if there is an offspring, but of individuals per flock. And you see them when the sentinel give these alarm calls, like the other species freezes, or they drop down, and and I think this is really incredible. Like that it was what I was studying for my master, so it's when I start to really appreciate like all the flow of hidden information that is flowing in an habitat complex like a tropical rainforest. So you walk and there is a lot of information flowing all around. You're not aware of it, but it could be vocalization, your presence of a predator, and information flows from some species to other species, and some other species spread it, some other species don't. So it's kind of a network of information, and so that's how I really got in love with the Amazon. That's for me, it was the door of access to this super complex
Yeah.
and magic ecosystem. And
Yeah,
then I
absolutely.
applied part of these questions also in Australia, because also there are complex flocks, and in Australia it's even more complicated, like the kind of type of association they have. So in Australia, I work. I got a PhD to work on a little songbird that is quite common and very kind of famous and beloved. It's a totemic species for many indigenous people in the southeast of Australia, and is a classic kind of flag species. So that you land in Australia in the airport, you see it on mugs, on T-shirts. So this blue little songbird is from the family Maluridae. It's a family that is endemic to Papua and Australia, and they're a cooperative breeder. That means that like they this family have a territory that they defend from other individuals, and they have a dominant pair, a male and a female, and then some other individuals, males that are helpers, and they stay in the group, and they kind of pay a tax, so they have to help to stay in the group, and they help the dominant pair to raise the offspring. So this species is quite well known for this behavior. But what I was studying, it was what happens during the non-breeding season. So we, as ornithologists, we usually study the breeding season because it's easy. We find the nest, and then we study what happens. Especially if you're interested in behavior, that's the perfect system on birds. You study what happens around the nest. But there, I was studying what happens when the breeding season ends. And I noticed that some of these groups kind of merge in a stable ways, and then they move around as a single unit, and they merge with other, and they form clan and bands, and they form this social structure that are very similar to the one that killer whales form, and African elephants, and we as a species, Homo sapiens, we form. Most of hunter-gatherer societies are structured this way. So I started to apply the lens of anthropology and primatology to birds and ask questions that were done on hunter-gatherer societies, and I got very similar results. So I showed that birds, in this sense, like these societies of families merging together, it's a solution for very difficult conditions to live. Like when conditions become harsh, groups can merge and help each other and tolerate each other, and instead of like having like kind of aggressive response to each other, they instead tolerate each other and can share information and help each other, even put their life at risk to to help a member of another breeding groups that is part of the same band or clan.
Oh yeah, well, everything you were saying there was really interesting. I can see a world where obviously it looks like there's lots of benefits from being in a mixed species flocks, but I was wondering about some of the downsides because I could see a world where maybe there's a sort of fight for food resources or water in sort of drought periods or anything like that. And I was just wondering if you had any more information on, so in tough times, whether they would stick together or separate, or if there's any information actually there. I'm sure that's quite a hard thing to monitor, but I was just wondering if you have any insight onto that general topic, really.
So I think depends on which system. So, like in general, flocks, mixed species flock is a very interesting strategy because it allows you to get all the benefits of group living. So we are together, so we can defend together from predators. There is dilution effect. That means that the probability I will be the one eaten is lower. Um,
Of course.
and there are more individuals looking for predators, like in the flocks in the Amazon. But so you can get all these benefits at the same time reducing competition because the other individuals are actually using foraging strategy or they are occupying a niche that is exactly it's not 100% overlapping with yours. So this is a very interesting strategy to kind of maximize the benefits of group living and minimizing the cost that is competing with each other, sharing parasites or sharing diseases. So this is a thing of mixed species flocks.
Yeah, that's
While
awesome.
in while in the other example that I gave you about like these other species that they form clans and bands like baboons and humans and elephants and killer whales, we are showing that these emerges exactly during harsh time. So when condition is harsh is when they form this kind of clans and bands, which is kind of counterintuitive because you would expect that groups would start to fight each other more. But apparently we are finding out that in most of the cases not like that. For example, a friend of mine is working on guinea fowls in Kenya and on vulturing guinea fowls. And these species, they are ground dweller. And they also live in a multi-level society, like the one of I'm studying in Australia. So they also form clan and bands. But what is interesting is that when the condition becomes super harsh, so there is no rain, no food, very like elephants, like these birds kind of all the groups merge together into a super clan and then they move together, they walk for kilometers and kilometers, and apparently they just use the information that the older individuals might have. They might still remember where food is, where resources are in terms of in terms of scarcity. So they all move together and get and go to places where there is enough resources for everybody. So I think this is a new mechanism that we are starting to understand that is quite common in nature. And for example, I was super interesting, and Chris knows I'm super interested in the trumpeters, right?
Yes.
Uh, for me, it's an obsession. The trumpeters. I would love to.
That's
I would
so
love
good.
to study them,
They
and
look
I would love
awesome. Yeah.
to work with Chris on this in the future. But when we were at Cashew, I was trying to get some kind of pilot data about the group of trumpeters. And trumpeters are very opposite to this kind of strategy. They are very similar to chimpanzees. they are in constant war with each other. So then they don't cooperate. They are always at fight. But when we left after a few months, there was a huge flooding. So all the areas got flooded. And so I was wondering what happens in cases like that. This is when conditions become harsh for them.
Yeah.
Do they still fight, or maybe in this moment they cooperate, like the guinea fowls in Africa? Maybe they have to walk somewhere else
Yeah.
because they cannot get enough food, and maybe in that case they cooperate and they don't fight each other. So that is the question I would love
It's really
to.
it is a really endless rabbit hole of questions because in the
Totally.
scenario that you play out, it would be to me much more logical to not fight in the flooded area. Whereas when you're competing, when you have limited resources to eat, you would think, yeah, you would fight over it. But it's just really interesting and you never know like how these behavioral adaptations came from. What's the root of that adaptation? Is it as direct as it seems, or is there something that happened in their evolutionary history that then brought them to where we are today? And
Oh,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting. I can see why you're fascinated by it and why it's a great topic to talk about for a long time, right? Um, I wanted to bring it back to because you mentioned the fairy wrens in Australia, studying them, and as you said, they're pretty well known, iconic bird, and I haven't been to Australia yet, sadly, one day, but from what I understand, they're not a species that you have to like go to some remote place to see. I mean, there's something that you can see around more urban or at least anthropogenically impacted areas. And I guess what I was wondering is that, from your perspective, maybe with them, but maybe also you can think of other examples. You probably can. Maybe you can speak a bit about how, the human altered landscape that we have that dominates the world has had an impact on behavior in birds specifically. Maybe some examples of that, because of course, so much what we think of with behavior comes from natural evolution, pre-human, but now with all this impact from people, things have it's a big impact on their life and probably their behavior as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think our presence can affect behavior in many ways, especially communication and social behavior. Um, Simply like fragmenting the habitat might change, like how the habitat is structured. So my limit, my constraint, the possibility for this complexity to emerge. Because, for
Mm.
example, if birds are limited to a stretch of habitats, there is not about 2D complexity in terms of like a real kind of large patch of habitat in order to mix and form these bands and clans. Or on many other levels, there is a lot of evidence of on noise on birds. So in cities where there is more noise, most of the birds kind of shift the frequency higher up.
Yeah.
But if they cannot, like they simply stop to call. So there is a reduction in calls and even on
Mm.
alarm calls. The light is also a great, very important pollutant. Most of the cities there is light in the nights, and this is kind of shifting circadian rhythm in many birds and affecting sleep. That has been studied, for example, in magpies in Australia. So, but on the other side, like cities may also offer a lot of opportunities.
Mm.
I've got colleagues that are working on the cockatoos, on the sulfur crest cockatoo. It's
oh,
another
sure.
iconic species
Yeah.
in Australia, and they have developed some traditions in Sydney and in some other places. So they learn socially to open the bins
Mm.
and access to food in the city, and this has
Wow.
been mapped and it is spreading. So people in new areas are now observing cockatoos landing in their bin and opening and get access to food and
Mhm.
so like people are now putting rocks on beans and it's how like if in the area the tradition has spread or not. You see like these big rocks on beans. So
Wow.
so yeah, this is like a bit of the two. There is new opportunity for some species and there is a lot of problem for many others.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
amazing. Oh, that's really cool. Um, I was just going to ask you. This is my favorite question. It's one I like to ask. Is what do you think you'll do in the future? Is it already mapped out? Like, what sort of Are you going to continue down the mixed species flocks, do you think, or are you going to end up looking at something different? Have you already got something in line that you're working on that you might want to talk about over the next year or so? Or if none of that is obviously up for talking about, then maybe you could say what your dream species is, or mixed species flock, or something like that. I'm just curious about your future aspirations, if you like.
Yeah, ideally, I would like to keep working to have a system in Australia and one in the Amazon. Um, so I would love to keep working on these complex societies in Australia because that's the right place to do it. And there is, if you study birds and you're interested in behavior, Australia is incredible. Like
Hmm.
there's so much crazy stuff going on there. Like all the bower bears, for example, like they're super interesting and you have there's a lot of diverse habitats from outback and very arid, semi-arid, tropical, temperate habitats. So it's just incredible. And so there I want to expand on this, studying these societies forming clans and bands in birds. And the other side, like the other dream would be to keep working in the Amazon. I mean, now it's some years I'm not doing research in the Amazon, so I would love to be back and set up a system with the trumpeters. That would be the dream.
There you go.
I have some students. I submit a National Geographic proposal on this few weeks ago, so that would be the dream. Really study and do experiment with the trumpeters because I think they have an incredible potential. They're just incredible species.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, well, that's really cool. I mean, I feel like we could talk about bird stuff for a long time. We have before, and we hopefully will. I'm sure we will again. But yeah, I guess it's time to transition to your story, man. And as I said, I feel like you probably have quite a few. I know you've been to some really cool places. Probably done some crazy things and seen some crazy things. And so yeah, man, I don't know what your story's gonna be. I'm curious. I'm excited. And go ahead and hit us with it when you're ready.
Yeah, actually, I have many stories yeah, like I don't know which stories to share. Maybe I can share more than one, but I think that probably the one that comes to my mind. It was like the first time I was in the Amazon. I was at TRC, and it was like the first 2 weeks I was in the Amazon. I was very young, um, and it was all new for me. And I was learning Spanish, so it was yeah, like everything a bit of a challenge, but extremely incredible. And I was starting to understand the power of that land of the rainforest of Amazon, and I was a volunteer in this project, working on guacamayos, um, and at the time was quite cheap. I know that now it's super expensive, unfortunately, to volunteer there, but at the time was super, like very nice, and you could stay there for long and working with macaws in such a pristine area. And one day they woke us up early, screaming, and I was not understanding. So they told us like run, run, run. So we had to run from TRC, actually is the research center and also the place where tourists stay. Run to the river, to the Tambopata, and I saw some friends getting ropes, and we arrived there, and what I start to understand it was that somebody uh, was drowning in the river, so we had to save somebody, and I was like, what the fuck, like. I mean, I was 23 and like first 2 weeks, so
That's right.
Oh my god!
yeah, so we went on Pecky Pecky and like spread out and start to look for the body, and then the time was passing, I was understanding that we were looking for a cord, not for
Oh
somebody
my
to save.
god!
It was
Okay.
already too late.
What the
So
hell?
Jesus.
and
Oh
then
my!
there were the tourists everywhere, like kind of confused because that happened in front of a bunch of tourists that were there taking photos of macos.
Oh
So
my God.
I spent the following days with ropes, with this long stick, trying to yeah. It's funny, but it's also
Well,
dramatic.
it's
It's
Yeah,
just
sad,
it's
like
but
not that.
it's just it's
wow.
just not sense. And I was like, what the fuck? And
Wow.
I didn't know if like and the guy that drone was like a few years younger, older than me. He was 26 and he was a guide, so he was
Wow.
a very
Wow.
experienced guy,
Oh my
and was
God.
from a close community. Was working with TRC as a guide. So so then we spent first day looking for the body, second day again looking for the body, and like the general anxiety was growing up, and sadness, and then the third day again, and then so they just dropped me in a little island of rocks in the middle of the Tambopata for one day to see if this body was flowing, no? And so with a radio, I should have called if like, oh, there is the body flowing, and
What are you supposed to do? Like,
yeah, I tried to grab it, or I don't know, like
oh my
so
god.
so yeah, they drove me down the river on one of these island, and as soon as like the motorista said, okay, let's go there, and point on an island, and when we went close, this huge jaguar, it was a huge jaguar, just came out of the water, and it was like in front of us, like, and I just jumped on the island to get, yeah, I was like, I want to see it close, and it was a huge male. I jump on this little island, and the jaguar was probably 20 meters from me, all soaking, no, wet, and looked at us in the eyes like it was really like a radiography, and we felt like a scan, like a body scan, and of this species that is, it's just, yeah, it's hard to describe. I mean, I know there is a great, I read once, there is a very nice article in the New Yorker where they describe exactly this unique feeling of being scanned by a jaguar. When a jaguar turns the head, look at you in the eyes, and scans you. And I was feeling like that. And then the jaguar just went again in the water and crossed the Tambopata River, and went away. And then we spent the entire day just, yeah, mesmerized, looking for a body that never passed. But after witnessing this, and that was like a very powerful welcome to the Amazon rainforest. It was,
Jesus.
okay, this is a land of contrast. This,
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
shit happen, you have wonder happen,
Yeah.
and you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So if you deal it, welcome. If you don't, go away. And I think that was like the click, and then I tried to come back for in the following 10 years, and I think that's when I really got in love with that land. Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
pretty
That's
extraordinary.
that. So okay. Follow up. They never found the body.
they found it after 3 days, 40 kilometers down river. Like the
Wow.
other group of tourists that was coming up,
Yeah.
they found the body. So
So
I
so
think it
you
was,
so they would have found it past where I work now, basically in Tambopata. It went down toward Madre de Diaz. Oh my
yes.
God, that's insane! I have never heard this story, like even locally. That's crazy. Who do you know what happened? Like how he fell? Like this is now like forget the podcast. I actually just really want to know now because this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
crazy. Yeah,
So what happened? It was that on you know where the Kolpa is in front
yeah, yeah,
of
yeah.
TRC, no? It's like this clay lake where like hundreds of macaws every morning land just to eat
Oh, I went
clay,
to
and
there. Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, it's like one of
Sounds wonderful.
these iconic places where
Mhm.
tourists pay a lot to take photos,
Yeah,
and so usually so the motoristas were bringing tourists, and also us, we were staying, there was always one or two researchers collecting data about like the composition of species at the colpa. But that morning we were sleeping because it was our day off, and so there were no guacamayeros, and the guys that day, they forgot the radio. So they brought this bunch of tourists on this island, the motorista left them there. They came back, and then the tourists didn't know how to come back, and the guides as well. So they couldn't call the motoristas with the radio, and so some of the tourists, some of the guys just said, "Okay, we will swim. We will cross Tambopata swimming and
Oh,
go to the motoristas," which, I mean, with all the tourists taking photos, and it's not a huge stretch of river, but there, like, the current is quite strong, and it's the classic, mistake where you, like, what people tell you, don't do it, and you think, but it's quite close, I can do it, and we don't know what happens, but I feel that probably the current was strong and he might have hit like a hidden log on the underwater, or like a rock, and then went
yeah.
down and probably hit the head. Something like that might have happened.
Wow.
Because, yeah.
That's shocking. What the
That's
heck?
that's crazy. I mean, yeah, that's wow. I've never heard that story. That's absolutely insane. So yeah, well, I think fair to say I'm going to be repeating that
Tragic.
story to volunteers who tell me, "Oh, I can swim across the river." I'm like, "Yeah, maybe not." Yeah, wow, that's I
Good
have to
lesson
say
for
that
that.
that might be the craziest story that's been shared so far. So congratulations on that.
I think so. I think that might take the cake. That had so many
Yeah.
twists and turns. You still told it very well. Oh my god.
yeah, that was amazing,
Uh, I
amazing,
have
man.
many others. I have many
Yeah,
others from the Amazon. What I love about the Amazon is that the short amount of time you are there, like, you can
yes,
collect more incredible stories than in any other places
Yeah.
I've been. And this year I've been to Subantarctic Islands. This is another crazy place. Australia is another
Yeah.
crazy place to live and work. And it's crazy stories, but like the Amazon, no, it's simply like that land kind of keeps producing
yeah, and it's
incredible
always
stories.
it's like it is weird things. It's not, and it can be like you said, like the combination of the fact you saw a jaguar on the day you're looking for a body. Like the chances statistically of that happening are so low, right? I mean, it's like like when I was talking to you before we started, I said, I told my story. Why would I see a pair of jaguars simultaneously in an hour and a half to have to piss in my eye? Like statistically, that seems impossible. But for me as well, within 3 weeks of working in the Amazon, it happened. So I
That's
don't know,
crazy.
man. It's just a weird place. It just happens. It's part of the life here. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
no,
100%, 100%. Like, just
Yeah.
crazy stories
yeah,
every.
yeah, yeah.
And
Wow.
if you work with crazy people, like, the statistic just increases, like,
It
by
goes
chance.
higher.
It's
This is
naturally,
true.
yeah.
This
Some
is
people
true.
like attract crazy stories. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Well, that was awesome, man. It's pretty late there for you right now. Thank you for staying up. I think it's like 10 o'clock to you there in Germany. So I guess we'll wrap this up, man. But I suspect we will ask you to be on again to share some stories from other
Yeah, 100%.
continents and other regions that you've worked in. And yeah, man, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to, and especially on a Sunday, to speak to us. We really appreciate it.
No, it
Entire
was it was
episode of just stories, I reckon.
Yeah. One day we need to do an episode like we're actually just sitting around having beers and
Yeah.
just talking about insane stories.
I,
I think
I
one day we'll do that.
It's the episode.
I
That's the
would
episode we've
love.
been wanting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, it could be just crazy story, like no biology,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
Yeah,
crazy story. Because I think
Yeah.
there is a lot.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah. That's great.
Cool.
All
Thank you
right,
very
man.
much for
Thank
inviting,
you.
and yeah, nice to meet you, Nick.
Yeah,
And
you too. It's
really
great. This is
hope to
awesome.
see you soon, Chris.
Yeah, for sure, man. We'll keep in touch, and I can't wait to tag some trumpeters with you. That'll be awesome.
Yeah, yeah. There's some much work to do. Some much
Yeah,
work to do. Yeah.
absolutely. All right, man. Thank you so
See you
much.
later. Bye.
Yeah. Big hugs. Ciao, guys.
Well, I mean, that was that's
So
crazy.
good, wasn't it? Oh my god.
I mean, I don't know what to say. Like, I was
The
not
story
prepared.
leaving as well at the end of that. Great. Like, no, normally we have a chat at the end for 5 minutes to be like, well, no, he just left instantly.
Yeah,
Just it was perfect. He just mic drop, gone.
yeah,
Oh,
like I just kind of speechless, man. That's
yeah,
crazy.
that was an
And,
amazing story.
yeah, and the thing is, like, obviously, like the area he's talking about for our listeners who don't know the area, like TRC it's a lodge called Tampapata Research Center. They do some research, but it's a lodge as well. And it's about a 2-hour boat ride, maybe 3-hour boat ride upriver from where I work most of the time. So I know the area, I know the river. Like I spend my life in Tampapata, so I know it really well. So, you know, that story and the idea that the body was found like somewhere around where I work is, that's crazy. Wow, it's absolutely insane story. Like,
You have to
wow.
do some asking around to see what you can find out. That's crazy.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'll have to ask a few people about that. Yeah, but it's so true though, and like we said in the interview and at the end, these things just happen, and it's like you get this is. I mean, to me, this is like we talked about in the very very first episode. The idea of this podcast and sharing these stories is that when you're working places like this, you do get almost. I don't want to say you get numb to it, but you just. It's like you're not shocked anymore. You can be like, oh, I didn't expect this to happen, but then you're like, yeah, but that's normal, you know, like insane things happening, and then things happening like when like it shouldn't statistically happen, but it just does becomes common somehow when you work in these types of places. So, yeah, no, insane story. I mean, crazy.
But he was such an interesting dude. Like I could have talked to him about those mixed species flocks and the trumpeters. I mean, his passion for the trumpeters could have got me. I'd be joining him, filming his research for that, just for the passion he had for it. So cool.
No, it's great. I mean, we had some amazing conversations when we were together. It was only like 2 weeks we were there together, but I mean, it was amazing. And yeah, it's such an interesting field. And I mean, I love talking to him because, you know, I would say it's not, you know, if I had to say it, especially, it's more ecology, it's more, you know, community structure and population, that kind of thing. And individual species level or a group of species level behaviors, it takes a lot of commitment too. Like he didn't go into that. He didn't describe the detail, but like for the listeners, like that's not easy work. Like it's super hard. I mean, those mixed species flocks he's talking about, yeah, I see them pretty much every day. I walk through the forest, hear them every day. But like actually understanding the dynamics and getting comfortable enough with the flock means standing 3, 4, 5, 6 hours with bugs and heat and sweat bees, and you can't be doing this all day because the birds are going to react. So you have to try to stay calm yourself, and meanwhile have the bins and have the notepad. It's insane commitment level.
Are these birds like staying in a very like small area?
Yes.
Then, because I was wondering how.
They are. I mean, so at our site, which you know obviously very well, Nick, we've actually had some projects where we mapped out the territory sizes, and the really cool thing about them is that they really don't overlap. You know, they're very much territorial, and the group composition in the understory is actually relatively consistent as well. I mean, he can go over it as well in a future episode. But basically, the quick description is that even within the group, you have this complexities of which species are in the group. Some are always in it. Some join it opportunistically. Some are only a part of it kind of when the flock passes by, and then they stay in their territory. And, you know, from my perspective, even doing like bird banding and point counts, more looking at the community and less the flock only, you start to see examples of it even in as birds move. You can be like, oh, this species, yeah, that's its territory, and the flock's passing by. Or other times you can be like, oh, wow, today this flock has this species. Another day you find the same flock in the same region, and you're like, oh, well, I don't hear this species in the flock. But again, like, the level of commitment that someone like him, you know, gives to that study is insane. Like it's really, really intense. This is not easy work at all, and it's especially difficult in the Amazon because, well, you know, I mean, it's just brutal environment, hard to see, very tough. So impressive, really, really impressive work.
Oh, it's epic. Yeah, I love it. I'm really interested about that. So obviously, being there, you just don't see birds really in the rainforest. Like, I mean, you can see like little sort of snippets, if you like. But yeah, like you said, the opportunity to actually follow a mixed species flock like that must be difficult. I mean, I could imagine like hours and hours. Yeah, like you were saying,
hours. Yeah. And again, you know, the thing is like if you want to just find it, it's actually pretty easy to find, and he would agree. He basically said that. But then to like find it, that's one thing. Follow it's another. But then you got to follow it in a way that doesn't have a drastic impact on their behavior as well, which means you need to be quiet and calm and very patient. And that's also really, really difficult and very interesting. So, yeah, Yeah, amazing work. Super cool, and it just shows you like there's so many different levels of research, so many different levels to nature in general, right? And when he described the niches that how it reduces competition because each species in the flock has their niches, that diversity can be so minute. It can be like the tiny thing of the shape of the bill, the tiny bit about the length of the leg compared to the size of the body, what strata they're foraging in, and by strata I mean is it 2 meters, 6 meters?
Yeah.
Do they forage in dead leaves, live leaves? It's super complicated, and that's also why we have so much diversity in these tropical areas, right? So I can see why someone like him is, so enthralled and taken by the Amazon for many reasons, but also because there's so many niches available for so many species, which lends itself perfectly to these flocks being so complicated. So
Yeah,
yeah,
all I could think about was when he was talking about like in hardship that they flock together, about like that evolution's worked out a way that the species will go on even if some of the individuals might miss out. It's just amazing how that's sort of come
yeah.
about in that
Yeah,
direction.
it's really interesting, and the topic I didn't get a chance to ask him about, which future episode with him is for our listeners quickly, these flocks are stable. They basically stay stable year round, like that's it. And what happens is if, like you mentioned, each flock usually has a pair from a species with their young, and then the young disperse. And if one of the pair members dies, which of course happens, basically it gets replaced. Normally another male or female comes in. If the pair dies totally, sometimes there's a bit of chaos for a while, but that void is filled by that species again. So basically, it's pretty like there's a slot for that bird in the flock.
Wow.
That's a simplistic way to describe it.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
the other thing in a totally different part of the world, in the northern hemisphere, is you get, and also in Africa. So in the northern hemisphere, you get flocks that are forming during migration, which are totally different because they're not stable. And then in places like Africa, for example, you get these insanely big flocks of like social birds, like weavers, which God knows in Uganda, if our mist nets, well, we had weaver get in many days, or we had like 50 weavers in a single net in one check, same species. So it's so interesting, the complexity of social behavior and what motivates it, how it works, and his point about the fairy wrens, how they work outside of the breeding season versus in the breeding season. Yeah, it's a super interesting rabbit hole, but like an important one to go down. And then the point about how the changing landscape can impact that. Yeah, that's also, again, there's so much field to study there. So super cool. He's an amazing person. I'm really glad he was on, and I
Yeah,
can't wait to have him again and have him on as a guest again as well.
yeah, we're gonna have to have him on again,
For
and
sure, yeah.
I feel like before we give him too much praise, and we should definitely consider getting him on again. I mean, yeah, it was awesome. So I think we should probably wrap that one there.
Yep, for sure. So yeah, that's awesome. We thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you again next week.
Yeah, we'll see you next week. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you soon. Bye.